Welcome to the TrainRight Podcast. I'm your co-host, Adam Pulford.
And I'm your other co-host, Hillary Allen.
This week, we're talking about the biggest, most obvious thing in the room, the big elephant in the room, the COVID-19 pandemic. But before we get into some of the training specifics, Hillary, you are abroad. You're in Europe. Tell me about your crazy situation over there.
Yeah, so I guess we're going to timestamp this
Yes,
podcast.
please.
We're Friday, Friday, March 20th. That's correct.
Yeah.
um, yeah. So basically, I'm talking to you from the future. So France right now, we are under official quarantine status. So this means that all of France is mandated to stay at home. So on Monday, the president issued kind of a like official 15-day quarantine status where all non-essential businesses have been closed and public places have been closed, but he took it one step further that now everyone has to stay at home. So and I think over the course of the week, now it's Friday, things have gotten a little bit more strict. At first he was saying, okay, like, you can go out and walk your dog, or go for a run, but you have to do it alone. This is, of course, all for, we'll get into the specifics, but, social distancing, limit your contact with people. But now the decree is we can only go outside about 2K from our place that we're living. Um, and again, this is all just like for the broader, bigger safety of the communities that we live in. And they're actually pretty strictly enforcing it right now. Actually, you have to have a signed piece of signed document saying, okay, I'm either leaving my house to go grocery shopping, or to go to the pharmacy, or kind of like there's some work that's permitted, like if you work in the medical industry, or like in a grocery store or bakery, those are still open. Like you can still go outside to go to work. And then the other one is to do sport.
Yeah.
But of course, it's still pretty limiting. I am fortunately in a little mountain cabin here, so I'm kind of already self-secluded. But yeah, still it raises some bigger issues, I think, that we can talk about. But also, the nearest town that I have to go grocery shopping is about 10K away, and it's in Barcelona, France, if anyone wants to look that up. But the problem there is I'm still trying to follow the government regulations, like only hiking 2K from my house, because there's actually no hospital in Barcelona. So if something happened,
Wow. Yeah.
I'd be a SOL.
Wow. And you have to get like permission to go grocery shopping, right?
Yes, and actually, so this morning, I went grocery shopping, and I speak very limited French, and I had my signed paper and my documents, but there are policemen actually checking just to go into this little mountain town community, and so I can only imagine like how strict it would be in other bigger cities like Paris,
Hmm.
and in the north of France. The pandemic is a little bit worse. But this also just kind of, to circle back to the United States, um, I think, some communities that we already know of, and like for instance, San Francisco is already experiencing the beginning. And I think the whole entire state of California, as of this morning, has been issued kind of a similar stay at home advisory from the government, from the local governments there. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I think the United States is obviously learning from other countries, but we first saw it in Italy, obviously first saw it in China, then in Italy, then in Spain, and so now France. So I think United States can definitely, some communities might be experiencing the same thing that I am pretty soon.
Yeah, I think so. And that's the timeliness of this podcast. And really what we wanted to do was, jump on microphones, talk about, tell the story of what's going on worldwide, but then also talk about how we're coaching our athletes, anywhere from the United States to Europe to, everywhere else in the world. So I know there's been a lot of communication from the CDC and even governing bodies on how to navigate this, just from this, the simple elements of, washing your hands and good hygiene and sleep and immune systems and all this kind of stuff. But what I
Mhm.
want to do, and there's even some like coaches and podcasts talking about, how we're navigating this. But what I want to do is talk specifically to our audience, to our athletes, and hopefully give them some tips and tricks to start applying this to their quarantine lifestyle.
Mhm.
And hopefully we get through this, and we can get on with training and racing as normal by the end of the year. So, well, Hillary, first and foremost, should our athletes keep training or should we not?
Yeah, I think that brings up a really good point, and it's a question on a lot of athletes' mind, especially when the word quarantine is being thrown out there. We rely on training for balance in our lives, and I think not only physically but mentally. And so, I absolutely think that you should keep training through this.
Yeah, I fully agree. And along with that is just keep your good habits up as well. And that means training frequency, getting tons of sleep, as much sleep as possible, but the great eight, so to speak, 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Take naps if you can, hydration, nutrition, keep all of those good, healthy habits that we have as athletes, keep those up. Finally, relaxing meditation in some of that happens in our sport as we're running, as we're cycling. That's part of the kind of the mental health like you talked about, but also maybe reserving some time if you are working from home and have some extra time is setting that aside for the cognitive. For the
Yeah.
training specifics, Hillary, with your athletes, have you drastically
Mhm.
changed anything in terms of their habits or anything in terms of their structure on your end with this pandemic going on?
Yeah, so I have some of my athletes are actually in France and in Europe and in some of the areas that are most affected by this quarantine. Um, and I absolutely have changed their specific training from day to day. So maybe they can't, get out for a long run. But that doesn't mean they should just skip training altogether. And so I've kind of implemented some just shorter training sessions, like if athletes have access to, a trainer, doing kind of things like that, and in, having more bang for your buck. So I know it's maybe kind of boring to do a long session on a bike trainer, but I've, tried to prescribe some like more intense workouts, so you feel kind of those endorphins a little bit sooner. But I also kind of treat it honestly like almost like a taper week. Where you're tapering for a race. That doesn't mean you eliminate all activity, but you kind of knock down the volume a little bit and keep the intensity there. And so I'm just trying to so people feel like they're still doing something, but then you also trying to eliminate the stress of like having to do these big days when they're maybe locked inside. And so that's I'm going to take with me for my athletes that are in the US when some communities are already being affected by the quarantine status.
Yeah, that's really good, and I think that's a solid way to go after it. With some of my athletes, I've been doing a very similar thing. Here in the United States,
Mhm.
we've started the cross country mountain bike season. We've started road racing, crits, and race season was just about to be upon us. But for me,
Mhm.
the approach that I did was basically like recovery week. If we did race or we had like a big like high intensity build to as kind of the final build before we started racing. So I was kind of like recovery week for a lot of people. Let's see where this
Mhm.
thing is going. And it's changing daily, right? So we don't really know. And my approach that we're starting, this weekend and into next week is truly um like you said, kind of staying away from the bigger days or the big training stress overall, and going into
Mhm.
kind of an aerobic maintenance period with a lot of for
Yeah.
cycling, a lot of tempo or what we call sweet spot training, where it is like you said, a bang for the buck, where you're or cost benefit, where it's not costing you a lot of fatigue, but you're getting a lot of benefit
Mhm.
from the aerobic stress standpoint. You're burning a lot of kilojoule, you're burning a lot of calories, you're racking up the miles, but doing it at a low fatigue cost.
Mhm. And if I can add something too, I mean, you brought up a good point. I mean, like like using something as your recovery week, right? It's not the worst thing in the world to, take a step back. I know personally, I've had a lot of my spring races already canceled. And so, I was kind of like, oh, well, I don't really have anything to train for. And that was the same case for, a lot of my athletes. And so what I've told them as well is that, okay, well, this is an opportunity to, kind of have a little bit of a downtime. And I mean, your fitness doesn't just go away.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll still be there. And if you, like you said, if you maintain it, you kind of do these, I love tempo work and actually running, but also like on a bike trainer, that the sweet spot intervals are like my favorite. I love them. Um, but, yeah, so just telling that to my athlete is like, you're even if you, you don't do these long days, if you're still doing something every day, um, like just to stress the body a little bit, you're still gonna maintain fitness. And the cool thing is that maybe you're gonna actually reap some benefits of a little bit of extra recovery time, and that's not the worst thing.
Definitely not the worst thing, and the more I think about what a lot of my athletes need, professional athletes and professional people, it's like we could all use a little bit of extra downtime, to
I know.
honestly.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, it's like a little extra off season.
Yeah, right?
Um,
Right?
which, you know, depending on when you're thinking it, like, maybe you just don't get an off season in general. Well, this is it. Let's seize the opportunity.
Exactly. Well, so to that point, a little bit of off season during season is because races have been canceled. It's nuts and it's all over the place. So I know you've had some races canceled, Hillary. Talk to me about that. Like emotionally, what's going on up in your brain and what's going on over there?
Yeah, so, I don't know if you wanna get into all that, Adam, but,
You're in a safe place. Safe
so
place.
actually thank you. It's really funny because my coach, so I'm a coach for runner athletes, but then I am also coached, and my coach's name is Adam.
That
And
is
so
ironic. That is very ironic.
I know. So I called up Adam. Literally, it was like the day, like it was on a, Saturday. I had a long run planned, and I kind of was getting the first wave. This is last Saturday. And I was getting this first wave of, okay, like your first spring event is canceled. And this was a running race in France at the end of March. And I literally laced up my shoes going out the door, and I was like, I have a long run planned, but why? Like I don't want to do it. Like, this was supposed to be my last big weekend before, building up to this race. And I was just kind of like, I don't really want to do this. I was lacking in motivation. I was kind of felt aimless. I felt like I didn't have a purpose. And so I just told myself, I called up Adam, my coach, and was like, like what do I do? Like I feel like I don't have something to train for. Like he's like, okay, well just like let's just go have fun. Like just take off the pressure, do what you want. You can do 4 hours if you want to. You can do an hour if you want to. Um I'm here in France. So he's like, just run to a bakery, get a croissant, and then go back. I was like, okay. And so having that permission to just kind of like feel upset, but then, take a step back and like do, you know, make different plans. Um, yeah, like that's kind of how I've approached this. And then that makes it easier for me to kind of go to reset and then to go into more of like a maintenance recovery period until more races come back on the schedule. And, up until now, like races, I actually was planning to race Rasputitsa, the grapple bike
Hmm.
race in
Hmm.
April. And that's been canceled as well. And so yeah, it can be hard to maintain motivation. And a lot of my athletes have been having the same thing because they have these spring races that are coming up. The season is opening. But yeah, it's just kind of, I mean, I think that's the wonderful thing about having a coach is you can there as much you're training, to plan your training, but there as much as like as a mental support system as anything. And so what I've been telling my athletes is like, okay, it's okay to feel disappointed, like feel it, but then let's find a way to move forward together and problem solve so that, keep everyone yourself safe and healthy, the greater community safe and healthy. And then when things come back, we can figure out what to do.
Yeah, that's just it, and I think that is really good perspective, and many of our audience and listeners do races and do events because it is fun. It's not part of their job, but there are athletes out there, plenty of them, where this is their job. Olympic bound athletes, professional athletes, and they're having a hard time right now because they're not doing, they're not able to race. They're not able to do their actual job, get to qualifying races, and I mean, there may not be world championships this year, and heck, they might not. I don't know. They're talking about delaying or even canceling the Olympics. I know we haven't, we
Yeah.
weren't scheduled to talk about that, Hillary. But any thoughts, on that one? Because that's a real challenge right now.
It's a super real challenge. I myself am a professional athlete as well, and so I almost feel guilty, like I'm not
Yeah,
showing up to work
exactly.
if I'm not, training, or if I can't perform or do these races. But of course, like everyone is in the same boat, and you raise a really important topic about the Olympics. I mean, I know, especially here in France, like there's going to be several countries where their professional athletes literally cannot train during this time. And we've seen kind of the timeline keep shifting, at least in the United States. And even in China, even though the cases are going down, I know that they've seen kind of like, as people are traveling back home, they've seen kind of like a second bump and increases in cases of people, coming back home. So I think that also could be a real issue. Like if we're having a bunch of people travel to the Olympics. I mean, I've heard, in fact, my physio, my like they say physio here in France, but it's basically like your
We know
PT.
what you're talking about, Hillary.
Um,
It's cool. We know.
okay.
Yeah.
They have all these different names here. But yeah, like my physical therapist here in France, he is actually the like massage therapist, the physio for the mountain bike team here in France that's going to the
Mhm.
Olympics. And even he is not sure that, they're going to happen, or like if they're going to be postponed, to what date that will be. And that's like so much uncertainty. But I think really the takeaway is that, we're in this together. Like everyone in the world, like it's crazy. Everyone is experiencing this. Well, maybe not Russia. We still don't know what's
We
happening
don't know.
there.
We don't
But
know.
but I mean, everyone's together, and I think it's like we all have this understanding that the reason these things are being put in place, it's to protect the greater community. And even though we're, practicing social distancing, staying kind of more secluded, and um even though, like it shows you how important community is, like not only human contact, but just community in general. And I think it's actually a really cool opportunity to be able to come together, even if you're not physically together, to support one another in this global crisis.
Yeah, I mean that's very well stated, and I 100% agree. And I think keeping perspective, to that point, whether we are professional athletes or professional people, keeping perspective through this is, we're pretty privileged to sit here, on microphones and talk about what we're talking about here: bike racing, run racing, the Olympics. I mean, let's face it, because around the world people are dying from this thing, and economies are tanking. People's life savings are going bye-bye. People are losing jobs. I coach a lot of chefs, actually, celebrity chefs, and they're closing doors, and they're laying off employees, and that's really hard. And so as
Mhm.
we're privileged, in the United States, even in France, I mean, to still be able to go out and get some groceries right now, I think that we need to use
Mhm.
that privilege and apply responsibility to it. And what that means is, getting away from the group rides, the group runs, not doing our races, for a short time period to not spread the virus, and being emotionally okay with that, accepting the fact that, hey, you know what, there's going to be some more ultra marathons coming around, whether it's at the end of this year or maybe early of 2021, we're going to get back to some racing,
Mhm.
and that's fine. But in the meantime,
Yeah.
let's just suck it up a little bit, save the world, and not give some high fives.
Yeah, exactly. Refrain from the high five,
Refrain.
virtual high fives and hugs. But no, you're right, and actually, this is kind of eerie. I mean, I've suffered some pretty severe injuries in the past, and this is almost reminiscent of that time.
Hmm.
And it's a little bit different, but it's exactly like one of the things that helped me the most getting through an injury period or a period of uncertainty is to like embrace the suck. Like like embrace it. It's uncomfortable. I don't like it, but I know that there's a purpose for it and this too shall pass.
100,000% embrace the suck, and that is stemming from your last podcast, I believe, with Mr. Allen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Oh, exactly. I love Alan.
Great dude for sure. But thus we digress. Speaking of high fives, you're probably not giving any more high fives in training in a group or training with a partner, are you? Or are you?
No, actually, and no. And, it's even one step further. Here in France and a lot of, European countries, they do the 2 kisses.
Hmm.
So, that was one of the first things that was like, "Okay, you just don't do that." But in fact, actually, so, I mean, I'm a pretty, introverted person, and so I usually do a lot of my training alone anyways, and so, that has been, like, implemented, but of course, like, I'd have, one of my training partners, to go on runs with, but, they say that it's best to not do that right now. And especially, I mean, you can speak more to the idea of like of riding, but yeah, group rides are probably not it's not a good idea at this time too, from the the social distancing aspect.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. USA Cycling did a great podcast with Michael Roshan. He's a medical expert and doctor, and I think we can put that in the show notes. I posted it a few days ago, but he gave some really good recommendations, which were, hey, don't do big group rides, don't do big group runs right now. And from the cycling standpoint, we we spit and have snot rockets just like you guys do running, but ours are done at a higher velocity, therefore it has a little bit more of a launch to it. So uh we have to watch that, as well as our droplets as they kind of spray around a little
yeah,
bit. And so that's why, not doing, one of the reasons why not doing group rides is a good thing. And you
yeah,
can't control the variables of whoever is doing whatever with whoever out there. So
yeah.
the recommendations that I've been giving my athletes, and kind of coming from medical experts too, is don't do group rides, especially big ones. And if you have been training regularly with maybe like a small group, maybe it is your spouse or your neighbor, or somebody who you've been in close contact with, groups of 3 or 4 right now, still in the United States, still pretty good. But like, you got to give each
Mhm.
other like distance as well. Personally, I've got one person
Yeah,
I'll probably ride with, but that's about it. And normally, like, I do a lot of group rides, so for me it's a big change. And
yeah,
but again, you get back to that emotional standpoint. You just, hey man, like, what is the what is the cost of it? That's the cost. Okay,
yeah.
screw it. I'm not gonna. It's not worth the benefit. So, so for those of you right now that are still doing group rides, knock it off. Don't do it. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so I think for right now, you just suck it up, put the emotion aside, and start to think differently, really, about how you get your training done. In Hillary, I mean, with you being, sheltering at home, and kind of being on quarantine, I mean, how are you getting it done?
Yeah, so that's a good question because I mean, I'm a very active person and it's hard when, there's when you're told you can't do something. And I don't like being told what to do. But it just like with, the like, group rides or, group training, it's like I think it's easier if I tell myself, okay, the reason I'm not gonna go with my friend or someone that I normally go with is because I'm doing my part to be responsible, like socially responsible for the greater like health of the community. But here what I'm doing is it's kind of it can be monotonous or like pretty boring because like I said, I'm only allowed to go about 2K from my house. Like maybe I can extend that a little bit more just because I'm in a cabin, like with these frontage roads where there's no one to to police me. But again, like I want to be respectful, and I don't want to put myself in danger, because it's not like the police are going to come and rescue me when they're trying to deal with this bigger global health crisis. So I've changed my training about, basically, there's a road up above the cabin, and then there's a road down below. I'll kind of switch off by doing and I'm in the mountains, so it's either I start downhill or I start uphill. So it's pretty steep. Like, literally, there was a road that I ran by this morning that was said 19% grade. So it's really steep.
Get it, Hillary.
Um Exactly. And so, like, like doing something like that, like maybe I'll go out for an hour run, but I'm gonna run the same stretch of road, like up and down.
Hmm.
And some days, like, I don't feel like doing workouts, so I'm just gonna go for just to run and just to get out. And other days, like maybe if I feel like it, I'll do some, just a few, like, pickups, or run it a little bit harder. I'm pretty sure, like, I've already started in my head, like, how fast can I run up this section right here? um, but again, like, being respectful, and repeating it. So, and then also, thankfully, I have a bike trainer, and so I brought my bike, and I call it, not only is it mental conditioning, but it's butt conditioning, because your butt can get pretty sore.
This
um
is true. Your butt can
at
get very sore
least
doing
for
that.
me. At least for me, it's like a little bit different than riding outside, because you don't move as much, you're in the same position. But yeah, so that's kind of what it looks like. But I'm trying to take it as an opportunity. Again, like, the volume is going down, but I can ramp up the intensity in different ways. And also, I think about it as like mental training. It's gonna make me stronger in the long run.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, I think a lot of it is for me as an athlete, and for my athletes as well. I always go back to, like, the shitty times. I think I can say that on this podcast, but, like, the real
Yeah.
bad times of life when you are going through an injury, or you're going through self quarantine, or whatever, and you go, whenever you're having a bad day, you go back to that, and you're like, you know what? At least, a year from now, when you're in
Yeah.
your next ultra, and you're like, you know what? It hurts right now, but at least I'm not self quarantined. So something like that. I know for us, since, like,
Oh, man.
we're less quarantined here, like, we're still out riding and whatnot, and the cherry blossoms are popping, and it's beautiful. We actually have really good weather. Um, so a lot of we're still able to enjoy that. My wife Kristen actually rode around, like, the National Mall. She was, like, kind of like doing, like, hot laps around the whole mall, just because there's no traffic out,
Yeah.
right? And for us, people are in the parks. Like, it's kind of crazy. Like, it's nobody on the roads, but everybody's in the
Yeah.
parks, and they're doing
Yeah.
park exercises. They're doing push-ups. They're doing jumping jacks. I posted this on social media
Hmm.
last night. There was a girl doing, like dryland exercises, or like some yoga stuff, on top of her roof in DC, and we were just, like, walking by, took a video. It was like, yeah, awesome, get it in, and
No, it's all.
yeah, for sure. But, to that end, I mean, start thinking about TRX, home gyms, yoga apps, and even, like, the mirror, which is this funky, and I have an athlete who has it, but it's like a personal trainer at home. And then you just mirror what they're doing, and you can do it in a, like, 4 foot by 5 foot space. It's pretty effective if you can't get to the gym.
Yeah.
And so just start to the audience members, start to think differently about what you were doing, and how you can replicate it at home and alone.
Exactly, at home and alone. And I know for, like, running it, unless you have a treadmill, it's hard to kind of, to to replace that with something. But again, it's like kind of getting creative. Like, your heart doesn't know if you're running, if you're cycling, if you're, doing an at home, like TRX, or like, like a cross training routine.
Right.
Your heart doesn't know. It's training. It's still like, you're getting, it's increasing, like in beats per minute. So that's training. So it's just kind of reframing it. And I think kind of a life hack that I've noticed here is, like, even if you live in an apartment in the city, or pretty much really any house in the United States, you can have stairs. And so, you can, like, run those stairs. You can even have it like be a family activity too, like wear the kids out if they're at
Hmm,
home with you
for
right
sure.
now. I know that kinda can be a hard thing for a lot of my athletes that they're managing work and life and training. It's a lot. But yeah, like running the stairs just for like 30 minutes. Like you can do some pretty good cardio stuff there, whether it's in like your apartment complex or in your house. And yeah, I think it's kind of a cool opportunity. Like I remember when I was injured and I couldn't run, and I couldn't walk for like months at a time, and I couldn't run. So I really had to reframe what training was to me. And you can do a lot of different things.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's 100% true, and I think that once on- once you are like in this crisis mode, and like you mentioned before, having an injury and stuff, I have a wrestling background, so I feel like I was injured all the time, so we were always doing everything all the time, and
Yeah.
probably overtrained and all this kind
Mhm.
of stuff. So from that background, like whenever I always get pretty creative, and I think it trickles over into my coaching in terms of how to solve a solution. But um, like you said, I mean, your heart doesn't know. It wants to be run hard, right? Now, personally, if I ran stairs, my glutes would know that that's different than a bicycle ride, and would let me know about it the next day. But that's just it. And so start thinking differently right now. And I think it was something that Corinne said, maybe on your podcast or a different one. It's like, you know, there's an opportunity right now, and that is to do to come out with a stronger core and stronger muscles than when I came in, into the quarantine. And, so I think that's
Yeah.
super important.
And what's really cool too is I think like I'll just like kind of jump into the virtual community that we're tapped into. Like we have all of these resources at our fingertips, like with whether it's on a smart trainer like training with Swift, or I know there's even Swift apps for running, like
Yeah.
so you can link it up to a treadmill and like virtually run against your friends or something like this. But a lot of the people that I even follow on social media who are quarantining themselves either in Europe, or starting to in the United States, they're coming out with some really cool content there too. So it's like, again, we're all connected in this greater community. And so, like, go check out that and get some new ideas for something that you can do. I mean, even me, like, I'm gonna be posting some stuff on my social media for ideas of what I'm doing to entertain myself in my little cabin, and giving other people ideas of what they can do too. So I think there's gonna be a lot of resources, and even CTS actually, they're gonna be publishing some kind of more specifically for bikes, some bike workouts you can do that are actually gonna be pretty killer.
Yeah, yeah, we've I think we rolled that out, I think yesterday, of all of our virtual workouts for cycling are downloadable for free. So check those out if you are reduced to the virtual side of things in indoors. But CDC has reported that the COVID-19 virus doesn't hold up well in UV light. So being outside is, to me, like, as long as you can do it, get outside, at least once a day. Get the
Mhm.
kids out, like you mentioned, get the dogs out. Like, just get out, breathe fresh air, get the vitamin D, run around, and enjoy that. Now, so practice social distancing for sure, and if
Yeah.
you live in a more populated area like myself in Washington, also know that as you're walking up to street lights and things like that, the virus still can live on surfaces even if it is in UV light. So I mean, I'm no medical doctor, I'm just relaying it from stuff I've read from the CDC and other doctors. You still don't want to be like touching stuff on a regular basis, and you want to wash your hands a ton, but get outside, exercise, get the fresh air as best you can. So,
Yeah.
with all that being said, Hills, let's talk about some normal life hacks. And I'm going to start off by saying, if you ain't first, you're last. And what I mean by that is, I actually learned this from my wife yesterday, Kristen, where we needed to go to the store. And she's like, "Man, if you need anything right now, you need to go like first thing in the morning when no one else is out, because they cleaned everything. It smells like Lysol inside, and all the shelves are stocked full. So we got everything that we kind of needed there. But that's it. If you're not first or last, get out, get there early, and get your stuff, and then head back home. what else are you doing in France, Hillary, that could be a nice little life hack to kind of get through normal life?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I like that, like having some like hand sanitizer or or things like
Yeah.
that. But again, I think it's just like following the regulations too. I mean, like you said, like social distancing works. It seems. I think sometimes I'm a scientist. I have a scientific background. And I think some people can get angry. They're like, "Well, why are you like why is the government issuing these quarantines when like generally when people are outside, if something doesn't hold up in UV light, like shouldn't I be outside? The answer is yes and yes, but scientists are trying to reduce contamination or the growth of the pandemic, the growth of the spread of the virus. They're trying to reduce that, and then also trying to promote things in a healthy way. So I think for tips for like for me at least for daily living is to still have a routine. I mean, it's really hard to adjust, especially if you're used to kind of like the go that we're always used to in life, especially if you have a busy life, training, work,
Hmm.
family. But for me, literally every morning, I'm a huge morning person, and I really like journaling. And so I start my day with like a to-do list of, okay, like this is something that I can do each day. And every time I check that off, I just feel accomplished. And it sets the tone for the day. It gives me kind of a purpose to do and a new routine. And so that I feel like I have some sort of direction um, in the day. And then again, with that daily routine is prioritizing that. I think it can take both the mental and the physical health of like getting outside for, even if it's just 30 minutes. Get outside and stay away from people. I think you can like wave, and like everyone's gonna know why you're staying away.
For sure.
Like they're not gonna be offended. Like it's actually kind of like the best thing here in France. Like if I see people, like I don't speak French that well, so I'm like, oh, bonjour, and then I just don't say anything else, and then they're just like, okay, like
Amazing.
go on my merry way.
The new normal. The new normal.
Yeah.
All right. Well, in summary, I guess we're living in a pretty crazy time, and we're talking about stuff that I never thought that we'd be talking about on a podcast. And no one that I've heard or seen or met has all the answers. And it might get a little worse here in the United States before it gets any better. And in France, I think you might be kind of at that point where a tipping point, hopefully will start to get a little bit better. But I think as athletes and to our audience, the kind of the takeaways here is to one, keep training and keep that structure in your life. Two, it's get outside if you can and do some virtual training if you can't. And then finally, keep perspective because we'll make it through. Racing will come back around and the new normal will go back to the normal. And we'll be, living our lives hopefully with a better perspective on the backside than when we came in on the front side. Anything else you want to add to that, Hillary?
No, I couldn't agree more, and I think just like a little sub point to the keep perspective. It's just we're all in this together, and so just a reminder to be nice to one another. Maybe your patience is a little bit thinner. I know sometimes I feel that way when I feel like locked in to a certain place, but it's having empathy for not only yourself but everyone else is kind of experiencing something similar, and in a weird way that can actually bring us together and make us closer. So that'll help us all kind of come out of this stronger on the other side.
Couldn't agree more. Well, Hillary, thank you for taking some time during the crazy times over in France. And I know it's a little bit late there, but thank you for taking time and talking with me on this next episode of the TrainRight Podcast.
Thanks so much, Adam. It was a pleasure.
Bye.